Hey everybody, welcome back to Old World Legends, where we focus on growing the community. I'm your host, Mike, and with me as always is Evan.
Glade Guard, Evan. There you go.
Well, maybe you're a little bit higher than Glade Guard, but yes, this video we're going to be talking about the Wood Elves in particular, how they've been updated, what we've been seeing happening with them, how does the 1.51 update FAQ affect them. So this is part of our ongoing video series where we're seeing the biggest impacts we've seen at the local community and tournament scene. Now they run a few events with it, really exciting, huge shakeup for the game. Evan, let's dive in, sir.
Okay, so I've got some notes here. Essentially, I've been playing Wood Elves a bunch recently. I've just been collecting my brand new army. I've been kind of focusing the paint scheme around kind of my Irish heritage, and everyone has a ginger hair because I play all the different elves, so I literally can't paint all of them blonde, right? You can't just have blonde Wood Elves, blonde Dark Elves, blonde High, right? So High Elves are
Well, you
blonde, that makes
could,
sense. And then
but
yeah,
variety is good.
yeah, so they're all
Variety is
gingers.
good.
Good luck
So
on
besides
painting
paint
freckles.
scheme, though, let's talk about Eternal Guard versus Wildwood Rangers. Why is that a topic?
So I think it's a topic because if your infantry get to fight in two ranks,
Oh yeah,
which infantry do you want to bring? And in the High Elves case, we talked about all of them, and I think that everyone except Phoenix Guard have seen it kind of pretty good. And we'll get
oh
to
yeah.
that with Dark Elves as well eventually. It's this very similar conversation.
We'll
But
get
here with
there.
the Wood Elves, you've got two options, and they kind of break the mold of the other elf infantry. We've got Eternal Guard, who have always been a big favorite of mine because they're the most elite spearmen in the game. They're weapon skill 5, and they've got a special Asrai spear, which gives them AP 1 on their spear attacks. But they cost as much as a Phoenix Guard, and they have light armor and
Mm,
shield, and they're strength 3.
mm. Yeah, and you're not going to get that benefit of that better spear with the parry save, right? So you're having to make the choice:
Exactly.
do I want to use the spear or do I want to use my sword and shield?
Oh
So
no, Mike.
it.
Unless if you use the Guardians of Talton, which is a special unit that's strength 3, toughness 3, light armor, shield, and has the special rule parry for a low price of 19 points each.
Oh, it's rough. So yeah, I think so. They're definitely better in the sense that they benefit from all the other benefits that the infantry bit gets in
Yeah,
1.5. But we really have this conflict of the really cool thing about them. Their spear is actually not benefiting from the parry save in any way. So you actually have that bit of a conflict. Though it's still good that you have choice. You still have, just like any other spearman unit in the game, from round to round of combat that everybody gets to choose now. Is it better that I use the spear this round, or is it better I use my sword and shield this round for the benefit of the additional armor save? So you can switch between rounds, but there's just not as much of a direct benefit because that's not typically the weapon you want them to be using.
true. And the AP from the Eternal Guard Spear is pretty useful because, again, almost all infantry is now going to have pretty decent armor saves, whether it's a 4 plus or a 3 plus, for example. So having no AP at all in your attacks means that even if you were fighting, men at arms, who you hit on a 2 plus, you might only do like 2 wounds with 20 attacks because they'll have pretty decent armor saves, right? You don't want that. So again, having some AP on the spears, cool. Their biggest problem is they're 14 points per model in an army where I can just get archers for 14 points a model, and why wouldn't I do that? But you know what? I said screw it, and I'll try playing them. And you saw in the battle report that we released recently that even when I had a character in there that gave them reroll ones to hit, reroll to wounds when they were within range of a special feature, it
Mhm.
doesn't work. Because they have the exact same survivability profile as goblins, and yeah, and they're 14 to 15 points each, depending on what you put on them. So
Yeah, well, they have
yeah,
the added weapon skill bonus, but to your point, they're still fairly
yeah,
squishy, and just their points cost for them make it a little bit untenable because they do not have the durability that a lot of other infantry with either higher toughness or higher armor save will make a big difference. And I think that's the biggest thing is that initiative. The elves have initiative and they have weapon skill. That's great on the offense, but generally speaking, the defensive value of weapon skill is nowhere near as good as toughness or better armor save. And so, as is appropriate to elves being fast, mobile, hitting hard, hitting fast, but not being able to take a punch, that's definitely true with this unit as it is with most elf units.
yeah. So in casual games, I like them a lot. One thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting a character in there. I've got my Erloth model for this. He's kind of my Eternal Guard champion type dude. Um, Character in there. He's going to give them reroll ones to hit with the Eternal Kindred, so that's pretty cool. And then I'm going to take Befuddlement of Mischiefs on him, which normally people just stick on their Dragon Lord or something, which is going to be hard to do now with the 500 point cap. But you stick it on the character in the Eternal Guard, then anyone who charges you is going to be at -1 weapon skill and initiative. And against a unit that's weapon skill is 5 and initiative is 6 when they get charged, that could mean that they might actually just get to attack before whoever charges you, which could be pretty cool.
Mhm.
So I think that the big problem with Eternal Guard is if you were ever going to outmatch someone, then they would just not charge you, or at the very least, they're going to wait until they can charge you from all sides, which is kind of what happened during my game against Cathay with Eric. So
Yep.
again, I super fanboy about this unit, but I don't think it's amazing, especially when compared with Wildwood Rangers, who are only about 1 more point per model each after you take what they need. And these guys still have light armor and shield, so you can still parry if you want to, which is the exact same defense as Eternal Guard. They still have weapon skill 5, so again, the same defense as Eternal Guard. But the plus side is that if you get to use your Ranger Clave, which is almost a great weapon with no strikes last, they have strength 5 and AP2 attacks. And so then you can have a halfway decent chance of threatening somebody when you want to charge them. So Eternal Guard never want to declare a charge ever, and if they ever do, that's a terrible idea. But Wildwood Rangers, if they're actually, someone leaves themselves open to a charge from them, that can be pretty useful. So that's pretty useful, right? And then also, if you get charged, you got 2 ranks worth of guys who can swing, which means it takes a lot longer to chew through the fighting rank. Also amazing. And then finally, the nail in the coffin is they have a special rule that gives them 2 attacks and multi-wounds 2 when they're fighting anyone with fear and terror. So these dudes basically multiply their damage output against something like Dragon Ogres by 4.
Yeah, and not there are not too many things in the game that have terror. Certainly, the big beasties, behemoths, and monsters typically do, but at the end, you don't really want to be fighting them. But fear, lots of things in the game have fear. Things that make a big difference with that buff that allow them to swing way above their typical profile. So yeah, it is just. It's just hard to still see Eternal Guard besides just the cool factor or sitting on objectives and scoring objective points. Rangers just seem to outclass them still with the 1.5 update.
So I will say the Eternal Guard are technically in core, and we've been ruling it that units that are infantry and not core can still score objectives. Now, most people are playing rules as written out of the book and saying, no, even if you're just frickin' Great Swords or Wild Rangers, you can't actually guard a forest or an objective or a hill. You don't get to do that, which is very silly, I think.
But that's they're following the match play guide,
Yeah.
and that different communities, are welcome to do different things, and that's fine. So different people play it different ways. So yes, in particular, if you are in a community that is very much following the strict rules of it has to be a core unit, you still need Eternal Guard for those objectives because scoring objectives is still a big deal. But the biggest difference is you do not have the durability or the damage output that some of the other infantry are benefiting from in the update. So you still have to be a little more cautious in where you put them.
Okay, so for the next thing, the elephant in the room with the Wood Elf changes with 1.5 is that because they nerfed the poison, which at the very first I was very happy with. I thought that poison, just auto-wounding, was kind of silly. But when you paid 15 points for each archer who had a poison arrow, now it feels like that's just really pathetic. And so poison, not that great. And so what arrow are you supposed to use now? So far, I've been defaulting to the Arcane Bodkins for the AP2 arrows, which against a lot of armies, especially because people are going to bring a lot more infantry with light armored shields, that's a 5-up save, stuff like that. AP2, great. The downside is some armies have no armor at all. Like if you're playing against beastmen or if you're playing against demons, a lot of them are like, oh, well, I paid a lot of points for these arrows and they don't do anything. But I think that those are in the minority. And so Arcane Bodkins, pretty great. I've been using True Flight on the Glade Riders, for example. So I think there's opportunities for more arrow types. I did try, and a lot of people I've seen, I looked at every army list that someone's taken to a tournament in the past 2 months with Wood Elves. And some people are doing this where they put the Glade Riders, they take the banner that gives you quick shot, so you don't have the -1 for moving. And then the arrows, they take something else. So they take Arcane Bodkins, or they take Swift Shiver Shards for multi-shot 2, right? And I think that's pretty cool. It's just that unit starts getting pretty expensive, right? And so one of the things I've been finding is it's incredibly critical with Wood Elves to be able to protect yourself against magic missiles. So casting values have gone down. Everyone knows that. But Wood Elves do not have a Collar of Corn or, Brazen Collar type item to put on and give every single unit MR2. So how do you protect your guys from being magic missile to death? The main way is to take the Oaken Stave. Some people call it the Broken Stave. So it basically gives you like a Dispel scroll with every single Dispel, which is amazing. I definitely need that to exist. However, what I find is that you might even want more than one wizard because as soon as one of them dies or gets stalked in combat, you don't have any dispels, and a single round of a magic missile spam list can just kill your entire army in 1 turn. as I found when I was playing a game that I did not record against another friend of mine who had a Tzeentch Warriors of Chaos bunker with 5 magic missiles, and it just
Ooh.
ate through my army like a blender. So
Yeah. So to kind of go back to the arrow nerf, right? So it
yeah,
feels like, right, this was generally good for the game as a whole in terms of let's
for
stop,
poison.
the brick of goblins or the brick of this archer unit just immediately wiping out any behemoth or large target thing they're seeing. That didn't feel great. Didn't feel great taking a bunch of stuff down. So that in general was good for the game. But a lot of those armies, the reaction in the 1.5 updates are players like, okay, I just won't take the poison banner. I'll just take something else, no problem. And now they're not spending the points, and they're just shifting the meta. They're shifting their list to account for that. But on the Wood Elf side of thing, right, that was the key way. One of the key ways the army was actually damaging things. It was a core pillar of how this army dealt damage. That effectively the ripple effect of this was better for the game was removing a pillar of this army. It wasn't like, hey, the poison banner is a bonus. This was a pillar of the army's damage output removed. So that was a huge problem. The second problem is, hey, my units are still really expensive and they're still elite units, and that was the main way I was dealing damage. Now I have to find a different method, and that they just aren't nearly as effective. So this feels like, while good for the game, there were no updates to the Wood Elf army list to reduce their points or to give them alternate damage output solutions. So it feels like Wood Elves kind of got hit with a double whammy on that, and so we hope this is something GW will look at in the future. But you should be aware that it's a problem.
So in particular, without poison, your ability to hurt toughness 4, 5, and 6 with your arrows drops off dramatically.
Oh
And
yeah.
5 and 6 particularly, in my game I was playing against Warriors of Chaos, and he had a dragon character who I surprisingly did a lot of damage to, and I didn't kill anything else from the rest of his army. Including, I fired around 50 or 60 arrows and javelins, including some poison ones, against a warp fire dragon, and did 0 wounds of damage in 4 turns.
Yeah. So I think just in general, this is an example, and this isn't necessarily specific to Wood Elves, but in general,
Yeah.
we've been saying in a lot of our videos, ballistic skill shooting is not very effective and feels very underpowered because of all the minuses to hit and all the lack of AP and the lack of strength in the current edition of the game compared to previous
Well,
editions. And Wood Elves had poison and great ballistic skills, so they were able
yeah.
to still compete in that territory. But now that they've lost poison, even with the ballistic skill, it feels like it's just a problem. And for an army that was so heavily based on that hail of arrows, ballistic skill shooting, losing this, they don't have the next thing over that they're going to switch to. So it's a problem.
Yeah, just to say though that certain ballistical shooting does really, really well. We've seen a lot of armies of, not in our
There's still
community,
some.
but City State of Nuln, using just Outrider spam with a bunch of characters upgrading those Outriders, has got 3rd place at the recent Castle Assault tournament in Australia. So that's
Yeah.
pretty good. Or maybe it was 2nd place.
But we're still focusing on specific
Yeah,
exemptions to the rules.
there's
The
exemptions to
general,
the idea. Yeah, and for
right,
example, Tomb
general ballistic
Kings.
skill shooting is not effective.
Well, and it's just that there's too many minuses to hit from the core rulebook, because Tomb Kings ignore
Right.
that and they're fine.
Well, they're fine.
Yeah,
Exactly right. But anyway, so let's not make the whole video about that. That's a whole separate thing. But so just acknowledging that Wood Elves kind of got double hit with this nerf, probably too heavy compared to, while good for the game, they should have gotten someone to replace it. They haven't. Glade Riders. Let's talk about
yeah.
Glade Riders.
So Glade Riders are one of the best objective grabbers in the game because they've got movement 9 and reserve move, and they're fast cavalry, which means you only need 5 models to control a strategic objective, for example, or to destroy a bag string, you only need 3. So, unironically insane. I know that a lot of people read the match play guide and they imagine in their minds that you need bricks of infantry to stand on your strategic objective and wait to get shot to death or get charged. That's actually not the correct, or at least the most competitive play. The most competitive play is from the first turn of the game, you move, or maybe you scout or you vanguard fast cavalry directly onto all the points. And then as soon as anyone gets close, you either flee from their charge, you use evasive, or you use reserve move to bounce around trees and shoot people and come back. So one of the best objective grabbers in the game for sure. They are expensive, 20 points each once you take a couple basic things on them. But I think they're very well worth that. And a lot of people imagine, hey, you've got all these objectives in the middle of the table or on the enemy's deployment zone. How are Wood Elves going to compete? Wouldn't they always just want to stay away and they're never going to get those points? Incorrect, sir. They are one of the best armies at doing that for many reasons, and we'll go into more as we go. So that's one of the reasons.
Yep, and again, so they're great at that. Do not underestimate fast cavalry, though. I would encourage you to take more than 5, because if you lose one and suddenly you don't have that unit strength 10,
So
womp
yeah, my consideration is that if you take 6, 7, 8, cool, you're still going to lose 6 or 7 to a single blue fire. So if you only take more than
womp.
5 if you're going to be able to actually survive any kind of hit, if that makes sense.
If there's magic missiles on the other side, you're probably in trouble. But yes,
Yeah.
optimizing the right number is the important thing. All right, War Dancer time. What does that mean, Evan?
So again, another unit to compare against the Eternal Guard. We've got a 14 or 15 or so point per model infantry unit that has a lot of incredible rules and is only benefited by some of those changes. For one, they've got evasive, which means if anyone tries to shoot them, if they're relatively far away, they can either bounce behind a unit of archers or Eternal Guard or something that then blocks the line of sight of the shooter, and now all those arrows are wasted, or all that fireball was wasted. It doesn't even redirect into the unit that you bounced behind or the forest you bounced behind. So that's pretty useful. And then Wardancers, they've got strikes first, and then they've got an ability to pick all these different dance types that they want to do. They can be more survivable than Eternal Guard or do more damage than Eternal Guard. And they're pretty much the same price. And they can be a skirmisher, or you can just put them in open order and have some spears in the back, double swords in the front. And this is one of the infantry units that actually might want to do a charge every once in a while because they've got throwing spears on the rear ranks. So I think that War Dancers are quite interesting. I would love to put them on the table. The only thing stopping me is that they're very old metal models. I'm not sure that I want to do that yet, although I did just buy the metal wizards and metal nobles, and I've been loving painting those. So
Yeah, or maybe you get creative on conversions, right? There's certainly a lot of hobby conversions, kit bashing that the enthusiasts can get out there. So definitely some interesting things that can happen there. I think we will see more War Dancers, but to Evan's point, you're going to have to get a little creative on your models. Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked about the arrows. I think that you can definitely have a mix of arrow types. Putting every single arrow as Hagbane was kind of the default before because Hagbane tips were essentially better versus everything in the game, and then you're probably just taking Plague of Rust anyway and casting with +4 and putting that on somebody if they have armor. Now, you're probably not always getting Plague of Rust. You're probably not always casting that even if you have it, because then someone might have MR2 on every single one of their units. So, and then Hagbane's not as good as it used to be. So perhaps maybe you mix up and match the arrow types, and this can help you be a little bit more well-balanced against different army types. And on the other hand, the enemy armies are hopefully not going to be, oh, I have 2 giant chaos spawns and everything else in my army is a dragon. Hopefully that's not going to be what we see. Right? So if that's not the case, then you can have multiple arrow types and they can all be useful, right?
Yep, and that I think is the goal, right? Rather than this is the default choice, why take anything else, right? The better version of the game, the army, is that there are interesting choices, and you want to take different things contextually for different situations. These do still feel like they could probably do with a little bit of a buff in general, but I think we will see new combos that we didn't see before. I think that was one of the biggest challenges with Wood Elves is people were really focused on the pillar combo with all the spam of all the riders and taking pillar fire and battle magic and all that. And once that was taken away from GW, I think a lot of people moved on to different armies. And so we haven't seen a lot of people pick Wood Elves back up that had it before. I'm hoping in 1.5 we will see them try it out again and try out new things that they just weren't trying before because of the 1.5 update. So I'm curious with the mix of arrows or other things here, what new things or combos have always been there or exciting now
so unfortunately,
that weren't exciting before?
They've considered in Wood Elves more so than any other army book all the combos you might do and said no. For example, there's a great bow that gives you strength +1, AP2, and once per game you can fire like a bolt thrower. But the bow is 55 points, which means the only model in your army that can take it is a Glade Lord, pretty much. You can't put it on for example, it would be amazing if you could put it on your captain, because he's got a pretty good ballistic skill, and he's got 50 points of magic items he can take. Or you could put on the Waystalker, because the Waystalker can actually shoot at individual enemies, and he could pick them out in single strength 5 hit. Well, that's multi-wounds too, and pretty good. But no, it's 55 points exactly to prevent you from putting it on anyone other than your Lord, who's capped at 0 to 1 per 1,000. And your Lord probably needs to be a melee character, right? So that sucks. And then you've got Bow of Lauren, which gives you 1 shot per attack you make. But of course, that means that the worse, the lower level character you put it on, the less shots you get for the same price point. And then they also FAQ'd that bow so that only one of them gets the arrow, the magic arrow. So the only arrow to take really is the Swift Shiver shard, so that you get 1 extra shot. So Captain with Bow of Lauren gets 4 shots. Cool. Yep. I guess that's all right.
All right,
Those are
so
the kind
let's
of
move
combos that
on
we
to
wish were better. And then there's really cool things
yeah.
in there, like these magic arrows, these special like one use magic arrows, like the Hail of Doomfire arrow that does like a big explosion, but it's 35 points for a single use item that does a strength 4 small blast.
Mhm.
So remember that the bombs that the Cathayan Sky Lantern drops every turn is strength 5, and they do it every single turn, not just once.
Yep, but there's definitely some sort of a new army or
Yeah.
power creep certainly in some of that stuff. So
Yeah.
we will see. I guess the biggest thing with the armies is we haven't yet to see with this edition of the game a true rebalance or an attempt to rebalance many things. They're having very select surgical FAQ updates to adjust some offenders or some global offenders mostly. And the 1.5 is again was not really a balance update for the armies. It was really a 1.5 edition of the game because they adjusted so many core rules. So the Wood Elves are definitely one of the core army lists that are due for a reevaluation by the rules team, and hopefully we'll see that in the future. But we'll hopefully when that happens, we will do another video to cover that. But moving on. All right, Forest Dragon versus Great Stag. What's the thoughts there?
So one good thing is that the Glade Lord on the Forest Dragon is not actually that expensive. He can fit quite a lot of items on himself, but he does have a lot of options. He's got the forest spites that he can take. He's got the
Mhm.
different kindreds he can buy. And so as soon as you put him on there, he's 410 points. You have 90 left to spend in a usual 2,000 points match play game. However, if you put him on a Great Stag, which is only a 50-point mount, you could basically just do anything you want, which is one of the reasons why I've definitely been liking that build quite a lot. The ones that I've seen online and the ones that I've tried, for one, you can give him the Wild Rider Kindred, which gives him Furious Charge and Frenzy. Um, so the cool thing about that is that if he charges and he has the Wild Rider Kindred, he has 6 attacks, which is starting to get up there.
Awesome. Yeah.
Um, and there are some great combos in here for melee for Glade Lords, which is one of the reasons why you're never going to take the shooty Glade Lord, because the melee Glade Lord is more viable. So you've got that. Wild Red Kindred as the option. You could take a Dragon Slayer sword and an item that gives you, it's the Favor of Orion, gives you reroll to hit and to wound for 1 round. So you can, hit on 3s, wound on 6s, but you get to reroll those into Monster Slayers. That's pretty interesting for sure. There's the aspect of the bear, which gives you +1 strength and toughness, which on a stag makes you toughness 5. That's cool. But more importantly, it makes you strength 5, which makes some of the other magic items in the game, like magic weapons, a bit more interesting when you start at strength 5. It also makes the bows more interesting. If you're strength 5 base, then your regular bow shots are strength 5, or the bolt thrower one's strength 6. So that starts being quite interesting when the rest of your army is shooting at strength 3. So interesting there.
Hmm.
I think there's lots of interesting builds here, but personally, I just like the stag quite a lot. I've been playing a lot of dragon in the other elf list, and I kind of want to break. So this guy is kind of like a not flying Duke on Royal Pegasus in a lot of ways. So he has a similar number of additional things he can stack onto himself than like knightly temper stuff like that. Similar to that. The big downside I think is that he doesn't come with a ward save, unlike the Duke. So he has to spend some of
Yeah.
his magic item points keeping himself alive, in theory.
Hmm. Yep. So interesting combos. So right, Forest Dragon's always a good option. Was a good option. Still a good option. You aren't hit too hard with the 500-point cap in the 2,000-point game, like some of the other characters have done. So that actually might make him a little more effective than some other characters that get hit heavier by that 500-point cap. But I fully agree that Great Stag is an awesome combo, very powerful. I think it's definitely something players should look at.
So Wild Riders have been good. They're still good. In particular, if people are choosing to bring more infantry to the game, I think that Wild Riders are an amazing counter to that because they just hit like an absolute freight train with the number of
Hmm.
attacks they do, which is fun. I like that a lot. In fact, a single Wild Rider has a similar number of attacks to like a Tomb King Skeleton Chariot. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
and I think we see a lot of people playing Orion's Wild Hunt with Wild Rider units in core, especially with the de-emphasized power of level 4 wizards, taking
Hmm.
2 Glade Lords either on dragons or stags or whatever, and or taking Orion and then having a bunch of Wild Riders as your core choices. Uh, Fine. I mean, you're basically playing the most glass cannon of glass cannons, but all your games will be over very fast, and so that's something some people want.
Yeah, well, it gives you time for a second game, maybe. And plus, they will definitely look super cool on the table. That's for sure. So yeah, I think we will see more of that than we saw before. Certainly. Um, Beast packs, 19 points. That is a really low
So
cost.
it's you get to have a single elf for 11 points, and each elf can then take 1 to 3 of the cats, or the dogs, or the boars, or it can have one bear. Um, so if you wanted to have a unit of bears, you'd have to have one elf per bear, and each bear is 20 points, each elf is 11 points. But I think the most optimal thing to do, Mike, is to have two beast packs that are just one dog and one guy who's walking next to the dog for 19 points. And they've got
Mm.
like movement 8, they're skirmishers. They can just run in front of things and be like, now you have to charge me, or unless you can fly, you're kind of stuck here, right? And that's a
Hmm.
useful thing to get for a very very low cost. If you try to shoot them with arrows or fireballs, amazing. You're not shooting any of my other incredibly expensive stuff, so you're shooting something else. I'm happy, right? I think that if before they introduce that limit of like 0 to 2 rare in match play, I think you would take like 4 or 5 of these things if you're trying to be super optimal. The other problem is the models, right? It's just they're very old, and the kit you buy only comes with so many of each thing. So there is some limitation there, but obviously it's a dog and a dude, so there's pretty easy ways to proxy that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that the Wood Elves have not had a ton of access to is very cheap throwaway, speed bump units is what I like to call them. And so the fact that they have this speed bump unit is very true. Now, again, it doesn't have as many wounds as other things, but at 19 points, for such a fragile army, which it is, right? Even just 20 points here, 20 points there, 20 points there. If that prevented a charge, if that slowed a unit down by one turn or half their movement, it makes a big deal if you get one more turn to shoot, one more turn without being charged, one more turn where they're not double charging you with something. It really makes a big difference, and it's such a low investment. I'd encourage people to look at them. And again, another really fun hobby opportunity. If you're not into the old models, some people are, right? You get your hands on them, but you can come up with, there's tons of cool models out there in the range where you could put next to a wood elf, and it's just going to look awesome.
Yeah, you just need a dog that fits on a 25 by 50 millimeter base, and one of your Eternal Guard who's not getting played for obvious reasons. So just have them hanging out
Yep.
next to him, right?
Or get creative with another cool beast. There's so many in the old world or the AOS range that you could just have fun making just cool models. So fun hobby opportunity. All right, we're down to our last bullet point, sir.
Yeah, so this is the last bullet point. I have been playing a lot with the Lord of the Wilds. I will say that it's unbelievably good. The Fury of Athel Magic Missile spell, Mike. If you don't know this, it's a magic missile that when it does go off, because I think it's a 10 plus or a 9 plus to cast, um,
I think so.
it hits you with D3 plus 1, essentially Ogre Blade hits. They're Strength 6, AP 2, Multi Wounds 2.
Oh, that hurts. That is that the most powerful magic missile in the game? I think it is.
It's very good against things that have a decent amount of armor and a lot of wounds and some toughness. For example, a fireball will do much less than 1 wound against like a chaos dragon. But when I cast
Yeah.
the spell against my friend's fully, I mean, obviously not. You didn't have regen, right? So it wasn't a fully loaded out chaos dragon. But ward save, toughness 6, 10 wounds. I did 4 wounds of damage with one cast. That was pretty good.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
but I think to your point is magic missiles typically have no place facing off versus the good armor save, high toughness
Usually no.
threats that are on the table. Usually no, and you could get lucky on dice, but the math is not in your favor. And so most of the magic missiles out there are a whole bunch of very low strength attacks, or they're kind of a medium strength with limited AP, and they're really great at infantry or maybe some small cavalry units. But this is a character or monster killer, and maybe not one volley, but the fact that you have a magic missile that could potentially do several wounds to one of those very hard to wound things, that's very powerful and very rare in the game.
Yeah, and in particular, there's so much availability of arrows that kill all the other things in an army if you roll decently, that having something that's pretty good at taking out, big chaos spawns or people on dragons or necrosphinxes, stuff like that, that's pretty
Hmm.
interesting and different that you don't see very often. And the way
Yeah.
I'm building my Glade Lord on a stag, I very often would love for someone to soften up the target before I charge in, because I'm
Yep.
not super durable. I don't want to fight this guy for 4 rounds. So what I really want is for you to take 4 wounds off the Chaos Dragon, and then the Lord on Great Stag with Ogre Blade and reroll to hit and wound goes in there, and he pops his one ability and hopefully finish off the rest of his wounds. If he doesn't, he's screwed. So
And that's like glass cannon. The whole
Yeah.
army is like that. So when you
Yeah.
strike, you need to make sure that we're going into melee. We better finish it with this one punch because we're not going to be effective at taking the punch back. So, and that's what the whole army is based around: is whittling them down, controlling the battlefield, and striking at the right moment. But making sure when you strike, you are going to finish them off. So again, as Evan's pointing out, taking that, you're not going to kill them with the spell, but if you could take 3-4 wounds off of a big monster, almost having its wounds profile, depending on what you're attacking, that makes all the difference in the world when you're saying now it's go time to be going into that.
And just one more thing is that I also, and I'm going to be a broken record here because I've been saying it a lot, I think that high magic goes really well with the Wood Elves as well. So for one thing, all of these really vulnerable units can become a lot more durable if they're ethereal. So that's Walk Between Worlds, which is harder to cast. You're not going to just be getting it off every single turn. Even if the other person took no wizard and they don't have any dispel at all, you're still probably not casting it more than half the time. But that's plenty. A single turn of Fanatics not killing my entire Wildwood Ranger unit would be perfectly fine by me, right? And then you have another magic missile that really helps fill a gap that the Wood Elves don't have, which is, oh, what if someone brings like 40 Night Goblins in one big brick? I don't have enough arrows for that. So Fiery Convocation, fantastic. It's a worse version of the Sky Lantern Bomb, but whatever. It still does similar things.
Still good.
Yeah, and then finally you've got Drain Magic, which I think is actually an incredibly infuriating spell because it remains in play. It's a 9+, so that means you have to roll a 10 to dispel it, and it makes the opponent, everyone within 24 inches of him, have a +2 to their casting value they have to reach. So that means their level 4 usually has to roll like a 9 or a 10 on the dice to get to things.
Yeah.
And
I think the fact that remains in play is so powerful.
Yeah, and I think if you just have a level 1 wizard on high magic with, my math is that you should take the Wand of Witch Elm that gives you +2 to cast once per game. You just take that, you get +3 to cast, you try to cast it once, and this level 1 just tries to keep the Remains in Play spell going while the guy just hangs out. And this is really important because Drain Magic can even work even while the wizard is fleeing. So if he casts it on himself and then it has to get charged and he tries to flee from combat, Drain Magic is still up there, still blocking fireballs from going off because it's... just think about how much the Ruby Ring, Mike, went from an auto take item to almost never going off with 1 point difference. If you make it 2 points worse than that, it will be useless.
Yeah, and that's just because of the math of, again, because we're working on a 2d6 system.
Yeah.
Every one pip is a very powerful, meaningful impact to the dice rolls and the percentages changed. So yeah, very much so. So it's an interesting combo.
Yeah, the real question is, can you ever get away with playing Wood Elves without bringing a high magic level 1 and or a broken stave guy? Because you really need to not die to wizards.
Yep. So we'll see. All right, cool. So that takes us through our updates for the Wood Elf realm. So there are definitely some buffs here. There are definitely some new combos, but there are also some challenges, right? I wouldn't say Wood Elves benefited from the 1.5 updates as much as some of the other armies. And unfortunately, I think the poison nerf hit them a little bit harder. But again, the Lore of the Wilds, the Beast Packs, there are some really great things still in there. And also the Forest Dragons not getting hit as hard. There's still definitely a competitive list. I love seeing them on the table. And I really want to see Wood Elf players re-look at this army, retry out new things with a new light versus spamming, Pillar of Fire. So excited to see what the community comes up with.
Yeah, I'm working on it, Mike.
Okay, so that wraps up that one. Evan, any last closing words, sir?
Yeah, just to mention again that you guys can always like and subscribe if you watch this far and you really like the content. And you can join our Discord. There's going to be a link in the description of the video. So if you want to join the Discord, ask questions, you got an army list you're working on, all that kind of stuff, come meet us over there.
All right, we'll see you next time. Stay legendary.
Oh, now you're doing it.